if the situation here at Albeit were not already grave enough, the ravenous serpent stalking the settlement has now sprouted a second head. Movement within the village is at a minimum. The only activity is that of light infantry re-equipping and repositioning in preparation for the pending enemy assault. Oh my gosh. The LAV outside the west wall was just struck by tank fire. It's completely engulfed in flame. With cover and concealment in such short supply, this may not be the last tragedy of this nature that we witness. The recon troops are doing their best to defend this vital road junction. However, there is no escaping the fact that they are seriously outgunned. Although the Marines have received some aerial assistance, the attack helicopters have been too few in number and too lightly armed to stem the tide. The latest pair of Cobras have only been on site for a short time, but are already departing the area. Something has definitely spooked them. I'll attempt to investigate. For VNN, this is CyberNet reporting.
With the arrival of the east prong of the enemy armor and infantry to the field of battle, the Marines of 4th LAR now face the Iranian task force in its entirety. Representing the main body of the formation, these latest participants to the fray more than double the forces arrayed against the village of Albeit and its small American garrison. Demonstrating unflinching nerve, the recon scouts' initial response to the presence of their new antagonist was uncompromising and swift. 2 missiles from Fox 1 excised an equal number of tanks from the group of intruders before the lumbering armor could deploy for action. Unfortunately for the defenders, these blows merely wounded a giant that is hell-bent on retribution. Worse yet, the shot pouch of their champion's tank-busting sling is all but empty. Secluded and outnumbered, the overarching question remains: can David stay the sword of Goliath and persevere through sheer force of will? The time is 03:23 hours. Much to the relief of the Iranian command staff, a special participant to combat has arrived in tandem with the T-62 MV tanks and motorized infantry company. Venturing up the backside of Sultan's Dagger Ridge, a radar-equipped mobile anti-aircraft platform known as a Shilka makes its way towards a position that will overlook the plain, where it then intends to purge the night sky of any and all aerial threats. In the meantime, however, the Cobras of Valkyrie flight return for another pass at their vulnerable ground targets. Assailing the South Plain, Valkyrie 2 once again opts to ignore the tanks of 3rd Platoon and renew its attack on the exposed soldiers. Their unguided rockets claim yet another 4 victims, therein effectively gutting the infantry support of the advancing T-62s. Valkyrie 1 likewise returns to its hunting ground and unleashes another flurry of Hydras at the immobilized No. 1 tank of 1st Platoon. This time, a single projectile strikes the turret, resulting in the summary abolition of all of the vehicle's exterior control mechanisms. Having lost its optics, fire control system, and antenna, the command tank is now not only crippled, it is also deaf, dumb, and blind to combat. However, its crew and firepower remain intact. In contradiction, the harried T-62-75 tanks score an all-important victory with regards to both their survival and their attack plans. As Captain Ricks recounts, the incident is yet another in a sequence of irreversible setbacks for his Marines.
Looking out onto the plain, I observed a pair of T-62s approaching the far rim of the wadi. Fox 2 could have easily dispatched them both. That is, if their missile array had not been damaged. The enemy tanks obviously recognized the vehicle to still be semi-operational, and pumped an AP shell into its hull. The outcome was undeniable. The LAV and her crew were finished. Almost immediately, the commander of Coyote 1 keyed his comset and shouted an expletive. From behind the west wall, the LAV sighted the perpetrator and began to hammer the unsuspecting T-62 with chain gun fire. To my amazement, the attack was so belligerent and so severe that the tank failed to retaliate. Shocked by the torrent, it simply reversed course and backed out onto the open plain, leaving the remnants of its infantry support to proceed ahead, in solitude. The entire troop was dismayed at the loss of a gallant AT crew that chose not to abandon their crippled vehicle. However, there was little time for consolation. The east flank had come alive with activity, demanding our full focus.
Atop the village town hall and freight office, the two Marine sniper teams assess the situation and take stock of their role in the battle, which has been relatively sedentary of late. Having been given authority to act autonomously, the command lieutenant determines that no viable threats exist to the south that require their immediate participation. With enemy sniper fire posing a clear and present danger to the vehicle crews, their primary function is to therefore interdict the Iranians in the fortress. Despite their existing base set being optimal for engaging both the bastion and the newly arrived infantry approaching from the east, the Marine snipers are simply too vulnerable to random tank fire at their current location. As such, the LT makes the crucial decision to abandon the rooftops and relocate to the east trench line. Although the entire section crosses the compound with caution, their divergent maneuver is blatantly conspicuous. The inherently stealthy nature of their role as snipers is deliberately forfeit so as to announce their intentions to the Iranians and thus spare the exposed vehicle crewmen from further peril of attack. Behind Sultan's dagger, the main Iranian assault force splits up and heads for their pre-assigned siege locations. While a single infantry platoon traverses the dunes on their way to join the remnants of the Sand Scouts, the balance of the formation move into positions atop the ridge line, flanking the medieval stronghold. 2nd Tank Platoon to the north, 3rd Tank Platoon to the south. Having been reduced to but a single T-62 by the initial volley of TOW missiles, 1st Tank Platoon's original task of charging the village directly down 1080G is no longer a practical option. The lone survivor, therefore, elects to take refuge behind the burning hulks of 3 armored cars. Illuminated by the amalgamation of flame, it is not long before the recently immobilized LAV, Coyote 2, takes notice and opens fire with its chain gun. Being joined by Coyote 4, the two vehicles pummel the semi-exposed tank with 25mm explosive rounds. Eventually, the vehicle's left return roller is shattered by a direct hit, therein relegating yet another piece of Iranian armor to the status of static artillery. Turning their attention to reference point Kasbah, Coyote 2 acts to defend itself against a new threat that has just crested the north ridgeline. Beating their adversary to the punch, the LAV riddles the T-62 with armor-piercing shells, the damaging effects of which thwart what might have otherwise been their imminent demise. Concurrently, the bulk of the Iranian infantry continue to race forward in an effort to rejoin their armored companions along the ridgeline. Given the circumstances of battle and the American disposition of force, the only course of action available to the ground troops is to use the protective cover of the Wadi to encroach upon the objective and, in due course, assault into Albeit from the depression. In the meantime, the tanks of the task force will attempt to suppress the village defenses and prepare the site for entry via tactical coordination with the MV Company's headquarters tank. Nearby, to the south, the solitary Shilka finally arrives at its ridgetop destination. The crew immediately employs the radar-controlled weapons system to scan the sky over the battlefield for airborne targets. Fortunately for Valkyrie flight, the two Cobras are low to the ground and on the far side of their attack pattern, thus depriving the Sentinels' quad pom-poms of their quarry. Overhead, the U.S. Scout Chopper is also on the scene. Implementing FLIR vision, the aircraft detects the presence of the AAA platform and promptly wards off the attack helicopters. Just then, the Shilka's radar lights up the defenseless bird and begins to rotate guns for action. Prudently, the scout follows suit, making his own withdrawal from the AO. Back at the village, the beleaguered Marines refuse to be intimidated by superior firepower. The lone surviving M19 section begins lobbing a hail of grenades at the No. 2 tank of 3rd Platoon, which is drawing nearer the Wadi Rim out on the South Plain. The GL team is joined in this attack by the No. 2 heavy machine gun crew. The conglomeration of light caliber explosives and armor-piercing bullets impacting its hull prompts the T-62 to halt in its tracks. Unlike its platoon mate, however, its attempt to escape the onslaught is short-lived. The tank becomes marooned when a broken coupling detaches from a track. Observing their compatriot being robbed of its locomotion, the No. 3 tank is persuaded into pursuing a different course of action. Abandoning direct assault across the Wadi on the immediate flank of 1st Platoon, the T-62 instead pivots and rolls out onto the far reaches of the open plain. Their new goal is to skirt the settlement and attack from the west, albeit as a lone wolf operating with impunity. Now deprived of additional armor support from the plain, the 2 mobile tanks of 1st Platoon take the initiative. Rolling forward in unison, they endeavor to test Marine resolve by once again cresting the lip of the Wadi. Coyote 4 and the No. 2 heavy machine gun crew instantly respond with reactive fire that produces a stunning result. A 25mm shell strikes the mantlet of the No. 2 tank in such a way whereby the recoil mechanism jams. Unbeknownst to even its crew, the main gun is now inoperable. The T-62 temporarily withdraws from combat, but is, for all intents and purposes, toothless. For the Americans, stemming a broad-based tank probe appears to be a minor victory, but is in reality a double-edged sword. Infuriated, the Iranian commander embarks on a rash and unconscionable plan of action that could have dire results.
وإحدى تلو الآخر، وإما لدينا دبابات تي ناقص 62 آلة يتم إلغاؤها أو أصبحت قادرة على. One by one, our T-62s were either being eliminated or rendered immobile. At this point in the battle, only 8 of the 20 tanks in the task force were still fully functional. Yet, the mission was no closer to being accomplished. The commandant was furious. The American advantage in night vision technology meant that an infantry attack alone would be suicidal. The soldiers required armor support. On the other hand, a direct assault was out of the question, since it was now evident that the enemy had a second anti-tank launcher somewhere on site. He rationalized that our only recourse was to obliterate the entire village from afar. Anything less would only invite total failure and our own annihilation.
On the last leg of their excursion to the East Trench, the 2 Marine sniper teams find themselves in contrasting circumstances. While Team Mongoose takes the long way around by entering the furrow via the cover of the northern outskirts, Team Snake opts for a more expeditious route across open ground and thus become the focus of virtually every gun located within the Sultan's Dagger. Recognizing this, the LT and his aide-de-camp dart from building to building, purposefully attempting to draw off some of the incoming fire. In the end, each team reaches the relative safety of their respective destinations, a bit shaken but unharmed and ready for action. At this moment in time, the initial phase of the Iranians' revised assault plan is set in motion. Those tanks of the T-62 MV company with line of sight to Albeit open fire with a mass volley of high explosive rounds. Their initial task is to reduce the entire rampart of the eastern perimeter to dust. As with any attack of such destructive influence, the opening barrage sends shockwaves through the Marine defenses, yet the only visceral reaction on display is that of bravery and composure. Making matters worse are two of the reservist tanks. Despite being stranded on the lip of the Wadi, the command tank of 1st Platoon joins in on the action against the eastern wall. The only other tank to partake in the barrage is the latest entry to the growing ranks of crippled Iranian armor. Now stripped of its sensory devices, the number 2 tank of 3rd Platoon demonstrates unmitigated frustration over their irrevocable handicap. The crew boresights the village's denuded southern exposure and unleashes a succession of high-explosive rounds into any structure that happens to stand before their indiscriminate rage.
The Battle of Albeit has reached an all-new level of intensity. The Iranians have picked up the gauntlet laid down by the Marines. A recently arrived enemy armor force has taken up position along the ridgeline and has begun firing down into the village with unrelenting fury. The Marines are responding with defensive fire in an effort to keep the intruders at bay. However, being a lightly equipped unit, designed for mobility and speed, I question just how much longer their ammunition supply will hold out, given the current rate of consumption. Without additional resources, their hopes of success, and perhaps even survival, may be in doubt. Especially since aerial support is no longer likely due to an influx of enemy anti-aircraft assets. Nevertheless, we will keep our eyes on the horizon and our camera filming. With photojournalist Macro Lens, this is CyberNet reporting.
Confounded by the tenacity of a mere handful of U.S. Marines, the Iranian task force is now compelled to pull out all the stops if they are to achieve their primary mission goal with what remains of their formation. The Battle of Albeit has become a contest of power versus finesse, where success is absolute and failure catastrophic. For the Iranians, there can be no quarter. For the Americans, there can be no retreat.
You're watching Tales of Virtual Combat on his Story Internet channel.